Hey there.
You're a very busy man suddenly, right now, it seems. Even busier than usual.
Yeah, busier than usual. Yeah, it came upon me the day or two ago. I thought exactly the same thing. I thought, I'm quite busy at the moment. It's a little too busy, but you take it. You take it when it comes. And sometimes it's not busy, but most of the time for the last couple of decades, I've been busy, really.
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about here, I mean, it's almost simultaneous, right? You've got a new album and a documentary about your life.
Yeah, and that was that wasn't necessarily really planned that way. It kind of happened that way, that the record was ready to come out, and the people who were running the documentary side of things, they were trying to get a deal for it, and it kind of finally happened, and then these people said, well, we've got it ready to go, and so it kind of seemed synchronistic to combine them in some way,
So this record, I heard the first single. It is a beautiful song, 1,000 Million Reasons. I mean, you've got this amazing knack for writing love songs. You always have. Yeah,
it came out really well. I was very happy with that song. My songwriting partner came up with the music for it, and on a Sunday, I think he said, "Look, come over. I've got this musical idea," and he played it for me on this old kind of 80s octagon thing that he was playing with, kind of an instrument that Mattel made, and anyway, it was a really beautiful piece, but he was playing it quite fast and quite jaunty, and as soon as he played it, I thought, this would be really good, slowed down, so came up with the words, and then we recorded it, and then I asked Fred Cron, who's a musician friend of mine, I thought it'd be nice orchestrated, and one thing led to another, and the song kind of just really started to bloom a little bit, so we just followed that, and it ended up being quite the piece, when we put strings on it. So it's I love it. It's a cool tune.
Yeah. And it's instantly one of my favorites that you've done. And I related really quickly to the beginning of it too, because one of my, I think, greatest memories of my life was flying into Paris, and I was the only one awake in the plane, and I kind of pull the window up just as the sun is rising over France.
And there you go.
One of the most beautiful sights ever. So when you're talking about that at the beginning, it's I don't know, is that just lyrical poetry for you, or is that anything based on fact?
I was when I went over to Michael's house, he said, "Can you write some lyrics for this musical piece?" I just picked up a magazine, and the first photograph was the sun coming up over Paris.
And there it is, right there for you.
So I thought, well, there you go. It's just, write what's in front of you.
It's very lucky to have that just sitting there.
Yeah, well, sometimes you miss it. Sometimes there's things, as they say, hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm kind of reading a little bit about this record, and I saw that one of the quotes you said, it's sort of an album, songs from being a certain age, which I didn't exactly know what that might have meant.
Well, I'm not really sure, but I think that both Michael and I, when we're writing the songs, we're kind of, he's a little bit older than me, but we just have that, when we're downstairs writing these tunes, we are of a certain age, physically, and we're kind of, you feel the pressure of time, because you can visualize the future. If you think about the last 20 years, it's quite easy to imagine, to remember and to imagine 20 years, because, it's easy to do, because the last 20 years went by pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And so I think about how old I am, and I think, well, maybe on a good day, and if I look after myself, I maybe got about that much time left, and you think, well, fuck, I better get on with it, and do whatever I want to do, and, enjoy myself, and have fun, and all the things that you want to do with your life. It's almost like I don't really have any idea about retirement. I've never really considered that, because I haven't really had a job where you think, oh, well, one day you'll retire from this. I just kind of, I've tried to avoid working for the last 40 years, in the straight world, so this is basically, what I'm doing now. Even if you retire, you still kind of do it. So we're downstairs working away, and you're still kind of trying to, you still feel like you're 26 or 27. You're trying to, come up with your version of Rubber Soul or Bring It All Back Home or whatever album you care to mention that you love. So you are a certain vintage, a certain age, but you always at some point you just kind of, the inspiration remains, for what it is that you've always done. So you kind of, you are a certain age, but you still have, I guess, you're just somewhat starry-eyed, about the world, and I think that's a valuable thing. So that's what it felt like to us, was that there was something both, considered about the songs, but also something which was still, hopefully anyway, a sense of wonder about them,
Yeah, I've never understood the whole, when a musician announces they're retiring. Like, I can understand retiring from the road because that's hard. But, as a creative person, like, hell, Tony Bennett's still doing it. He's in his 90s, he's about to go on another tour, so...
Yeah, he's an extraordinary person, isn't he? Just a really extraordinary man. I've never met him, but he seems like a really extraordinary person,
Yeah.
Very, very creative and smart and really kind of, there's a pragmatic aspect to it as well. He's like, I've got to keep working.
Yeah.
Because he's got that thing. Well, you don't stop working, because if you stop working, then people forget about you.
Yeah, and I always figured as long as you can do it, what's the alternative? I mean, you get bored at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know, unless you want to, hog farm or something. I don't know, but
yeah, and there is that thing of just, I always kind of make a joke of it, but it's you've had breakfast, now what?
Yeah, right. The day's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, you got to do something. Yeah, you're all dressed up. You put your clothes on.
Well, I do want to hear about this documentary a little bit, though. I mean, I see the guys approached you with it. They kind of brought the idea to you, and it's a great way to tell a story. I don't know. I mean, had you ever thought of doing the other side? Because this seems much easier than writing a book.
Yeah, I've actually started the book. I started the book a number of years ago, and then I just stopped. And I feel terrible about it, because I actually have a deal for it. It's not a deal that involves any money or anything, but I basically a lunch, and a promise that I would deliver this book, and I haven't, and I feel awful, because it's kind of a good publisher, and I started it, and I was really into it, and then I don't know what I know. My mother died. My mother died about 3.5 years ago, and then I couldn't do it. I would sit down to try and write stuff, and I just wasn't into it. And I'll get back to it. But it was around that time that these guys approached me and said they had this treatment, and said, "Do you want to do some filming?" So it seemed fortuitous.
You could just transcribe the entire documentary at this point and say, "There you go. There's your book."
Well, you could. I suppose. I was into it. I was kind of into the writing process, and kind of trying to figure out how you could write something about one's life or things which just made it different somehow from other books you read in a similar thing. But and then this happened, and then this happened. It was more about my approach at the time. Anyway, was about very much the present. Was letting the present day. Say, for example, if you're in a particular town, really letting that inform the story of keeping it present. Like almost like a diary. Mm-hmm. But letting the present day inform the past, because often you're repeating yourself. Often you're present somewhere, and then the past reveals itself, But in making it like that, rather than kind of too linear, and orderly. But anyway, hopefully I'll get back to it at some point.
It sounds really cool. I hope you do. As far as the movie, though, I mean, that's your life in moving pictures. Were there any, I don't know, startling realizations that you'd looked over, or moments of, did that really happen?
It was more, because I've kind of traveled, in relative secrecy, for the last couple of decades. I have fans who've come to see me play, and I've, done records and all that kind of stuff, but But as far as if you want to call the general public are concerned, it's, once you're not, you seem to, you often the attitudes, oh yeah, what happened to that guy, or what happened to that band? It's a little bit like people don't really pay attention to, in any great, in any detail to what you're doing, and why should they? I mean, they've got their own lives, I mean, someone like yourself, because you're involved in, or you're interested, people who are interested pay attention, but for the most part, most people don't. So it was good in that sense that at least you go, okay, well, this is filmed, and it's a document of the fact that you have been doing stuff, and you do still exist, really, and you're still doing things that hopefully are useful in some way. So I quite like that aspect of it. That it's not that it's there for people. It exists, and which is kind of some kind of affirmation of the work you've been doing, in a way. So I was happy about that. But it's a snapshot, of what's happened. There's always things that you get a bit of what you've been doing, and I think that the more they started to film, the more they realized that of the bigness of the story in a way, or even just the fact that it's more of a common tale than you'd imagine. Having a lot of success and then that going away, and then what do you do after that? How do you deal with the rest of your life? So I think that these guys, they'd come to see me play, and they liked the solo show, and they liked the solo songs and all that, and they wanted to, expose that to a wider audience. But the more they filmed, and the more involved they got, the more they realized that the backstory had never really been told very well. The whole Men at Work story was a band that was immensely successful, then it just kind of virtually just disappeared, So they got caught up in that as well, which became more a part of the story the more the longer they filmed. Yeah,
and that interesting when any time, especially in music, as we look back on any artist who had any level of fame, it's always this little bitty part of their life. I mean, even when you take the Beatles, what is that, 7-8 years, and
yes,
and I think Van Morrison said something to that ilk too. He was like, everybody wants to concentrate on about 3 or 4 years. He goes, I've done so many things in the 80s, in the 90s. There's so many stories, and yet that's the part that everybody wants, right there. That's the hook. Yep. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I did some stuff yesterday, and it's amazing. People still say to me, "So what is Vegemite?" And you think to yourself, it's kind of, they all think it's funny and stuff, and it's. I mean, on one level it is, but you think to yourself, why would they think that would be a question that you'd really want to hear? 40 years later, and also they've probably got a computer.
Turn the question back around on them. Ask what they did 40 years ago on this one day.
But that's the point of reference. I don't really mind it. It's not something that is upsetting at all. But I mean, the thing about that was those things happened to me. And you're involved in it. You're part of it. And that's something that you really, that relationship you have with yourself is the really important, exciting one, because I was there when those things happened, and that never leaves you. It never in a lot of ways it never leaves you. That whatever happened, whether the first time you came to New York or the first time you played here or the first time you did that, it's all just so present. It doesn't really feel like part of the past. So it's something that. When people say, "Oh, he was once this, he's once that," you're always that. It never. It's as present now as it ever was. It's not something that you think, "Oh, that's a," go back into that room, and reminisce about those days. It's not something that I ever really do. Because it's really just it's right there in front of me. All I got to do is remember it and think about it, and I go, "Oh yeah, that's part of me. It's inside you."
Yeah, that's a great way to deal with it, and a good mantra to have. I got to run, and I'll let you run too. I do really love the new record. Nice talking to you, Colin. Take care.
Bye.